Hey guys, it's Tim Moen, leader of the Libertarian Party Canada, and I'm just back from a weekend in Yellowstone with my wife. Had a great time, and I'm getting all these messages asking for my comment or opinion on Maxime Bernier's immigration plan that he just unveiled, I guess, at the end of last week. Um, well, clearly Max is doubling down on populism, right? So the number went from 250,000 cap to about half that, between 100 and 150,000. And, this is clearly an attempt to be pragmatic, right? He's not doing great in the polls. And the things that get him the most popularity are when he appeals or panders to populists. And I mean, this is how his party was started. It started with tweets about multiculturalism, typical populist talking points. I mean, he didn't get kicked out of the Conservative caucus for saying libertarian things like taxation is theft, end the war on drugs, end foreign interventionism, or anything like that. No, he took aim at diversity and multiculturalism. And, so he rightly criticized the cult of diversity. But I mean, that was clearly a shout out to populists, not libertarians, who kind of reject both the cult of multiculturalism and diversity, and we also reject the cult of homogeneity. We see them as two sides of the same coin. We're all about the individual. And, populists tend to be more identitarian, more collectivist. In fact, the latest movement or shift in conservatism, the new conservatism, is towards conservative nationalism, right? And there was a recent convention in the U.S. Tucker Carlson was there, Peter Thiel was there, Steve Bannon was there. Tucker Carlson's speech at this thing was titled something like, "Big business hates your family." This is this is the direction populism is going, right? Populism is not taking us towards liberty. It's not taking us towards libertarianism. It's taking us towards an authoritarian daddy state. All right, Tucker Carlson et al., all these new conservatives, all these populists, they want dramatic state intervention in the economy. They want the state, the government, to punish businesses. They want the state to control businesses. They want to put on tariffs. They want economic nationalism. They want to, put up walls around trade. This is what Bernier needs to pander to. He needs to attract these types of people if he wants to be successful politically. And that's what he's doing. First, just by starting a party called the People's Party, right? As standard populist rhetoric, the people, as if there's something called the will of the people, right? Essentially, it's bolstering this idea that mob rule is preferable to individualism or something like that, or that the government can accurately reflect the will of the people. There's no such thing, by the way. So, all the noises that he's making that are getting him attention, that are getting him votes, that are getting him support, circle around populism. Now, libertarians like me, we have had some hope in Bernier. I mean, he had a somewhat libertarian economic platform in the election. And, we love the fact that he wants free market milk. And we were hoping that underneath all that, he's a libertarian at heart, right? But of course, he still supports the drug war. He still supports foreign interventionism. His policy calls for support of NATO and fighting the terrorists over there before they come over here, which is obviously insane. That's what has led to more terrorism. I mean, he supported the bombing of Libya and creating open slave markets there. It doesn't look like much has changed there, right? So he's making all these populist noises. He's voting, he's pushing. And so this immigration policy is simply a reflection of that pragmatism. In order for him to get more votes, maybe they feel they're languishing in the polls a bit, he needs to double down and come out even harder on immigration, right? And so that's the first problem, right? This clear signal that he's interested in doing the thing that's going to get him votes, populism, right? Rather than advancing libertarianism. So, okay, that doesn't bode well for libertarians who support him. But this is something that conservative parties always do, right? They use libertarians, they invite them into their folds, they pretend to be libertarian, they say, yeah, we support the individual, and then they disavow libertarians eventually because libertarians stick by their guns. They're principled, right? And we saw this back in the 90s with the Reform Party, which had a lot of libertarian energy behind it. And then, of course, they amalgamated with the other conservative party and formed the CPC. And Harper was looked at by a lot of libertarians and classical liberals as, okay, this guy gets it. He understands individual liberty, and they threw their support behind him. And slowly they were pushed out of the party. They just, because libertarians are just not, they're inconvenient, right? Sticking with principles is inconvenient when you're trying to get votes and trying to maintain power. And eventually Harper just outright said libertarians, at a Manning conference, he basically disavowed libertarians and basically said they were idiots or something like that. So conservatives have no problem pulling libertarian support, but ultimately they're pragmatists. They're interested in getting votes and getting into power, because that's the only way we're going to be able to get liberty, guys. And this is how government grows. Anyways, I digress. So I don't think Max is any different in this regard. He's using libertarians to get some support, to get some energy. Libertarians see that, oh, maybe we could actually get a seat and we could advance liberty principles on a bigger stage. But Max is holding on to you like, you're basically been friend zoned, right? And this has been my experience with Max. It's continuous friend zoning. And I think some libertarians are seeing that they're continually friend zoned, right? Max is pandering to populists, and he's going after that vote. And libertarians are just useful tools to go out there and knock on doors. And, eventually, for Max's party to be successful, he has to adopt the mainstream conservative views, and the mainstream conservative views are trending towards this populism of Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon and that sort of thing, of economic nationalism, of authoritarian statism by daddy rather than mummy. And that's what Maxime's going to have to do if he wants to have success. And that's just the reality of it. If you want votes, that's what you have to do. Now, the second problem with his policy is this fixation, just like all the other parties, on a number. This is the right number. So Maxime now says 150,000, 100 to 150,000. That's the right number. A few months ago, he said it was 250,000. Scheer, I think, says it's 350,000. Trudeau says it's 450,000. The NDP say it's 1% of the population. So the central planners have all run the calculations, and the number is somewhere between 0.4% of the population per year to 1.2% of the population per year, right? And on one hand, you have the PPC saying 0.4%. On the other hand, you have the Liberals saying 1.2%, and everyone else falls somewhere in between. Well, how do they know? How do they know what the right number of immigrants are? This just speaks to this idea that government someone tweeted to me. I made some kind of tweet about this. I said, how does the government know? And this guy's like, well, if not the people, then who? Right? As if the government is the people, as if the state is the people. But this is part of the problem with this meme that, when you advance populism, you're advancing this idea that the people, that there's something called the will of the people, and that this is better than having the elites rule us or whatever, right? So they're anti-establishment on one hand, which is great, but they fail to recognize that the establishment is the swamp, is the people around us that want the government to do stuff. And so, it's anyways. But the third problem with this platform, and the most troubling one from my perspective, is that it calls for a face-to-face values test to test whether someone has Canadian values or not. So now we have the government, the state, the people that steal half our income every year, that come into our house, that march our kids off to war, that march them off to school, that indoctrinate them into statist propaganda in public school, that, are responsible for infringing our liberty across the spectrum, that tell us what kind of milk we can buy and sell, that what we can and can't put into our body. These people are now going to be responsible for policing thoughts. Okay. Now, on one hand, they are, Max is criticizing the human rights commissions, rightfully so, for this, the latest one is this transgender woman who wants her balls waxed and wants to force people to wax her balls. But, the irony here is that Max voted for Bill C-16, which essentially makes it illegal to not wax lady balls. Okay, so now he talked to Jordan Peterson and changed his mind on C-16, but it doesn't seem like he's learned his lesson. So he regrets voting for C-16, which gives human rights all these powers to police thought. But now he wants the government to police thought. Now, first of all, who gives the state the power to figure out what Canadian values are? Like, even if Maxime Bernier gets it right this time, even if he figures out what Canadian values are and can somehow encapsulate that and articulate that and give it to the guy screening these immigrants, does he seriously want Justin Trudeau articulating what Canadian values are? Should Justin Trudeau have a guy there, asking questions like, let's imagine that you run a bikini waxing shop in Canada here, and a lady comes in and wants her balls waxed, but you don't want to do that. What do? Do you wax the balls, or do you turn her away? Well, what's the right answer to that? If we go off Bill C-16, if we talk to Justin Trudeau, it's going to be a wax the balls, whether you want to do it or not, right? So I mean, this is just nonsense. Like, who would you trust to determine who Canadian values are? The people that take half your stuff, that lock you in cages for putting the wrong thing in your body. That's my opinion on Bernier's immigration policy. The fence, I guess that's a good idea. There's probably some areas there. And listen, I'll be coming out with my immigration policy pretty soon. Libertarians, not all libertarians are open border. Okay, sure. If we get rid of the welfare state, if we whittle government down to the night watchman state where it's just police, courts, and military, maybe then we can have open borders. But in the meantime, I agree. Okay, let's have some border controls. But I want to use a market approach. I want people to be able to come here if they're sponsored by a Canadian citizen. If a Canadian citizen is willing to backstop the financial burden of bringing someone over, if they're willing to say, take on some liability if that person goes off the rails and becomes a criminal or something like that, then I say that Canadian citizen should be able to sponsor whoever they want. If they've got skin in the game, that's a lot more than these politicians have in the game. We're giving the state the power to police thoughts, to determine who comes into our country or not. I mean, if you think immigration is a big problem, the last people you want in charge of it is the state. The state does not make things better, it makes things worse. So we need to find policies that restrain the state and keep it out of immigration. And that's what my policy is going to focus on. It's not going to be arbitrary numbers. We're not going to give central planners all this power to figure out, well, this is the right number and these are the Canadian values. That is stupid. It's stupid. Anyways, let me know your thoughts below. Look, libertarians, I know eventually the PPC is going to let you down. It's let down a lot of libertarians already. They're jumping ship. They're coming back home to the Libertarian Party. You're welcome with open arms. We'll always be here for you. We're always going to hold the torch of liberty high. And when your heart's broken over there, come on back to the Libertarian Party of Canada. Let's advance liberty together. The only thing that's going to change this around, the only metric that matters here, folks, is what you're doing now creating more libertarians tomorrow? Are there more libertarians tomorrow because of what you're doing? Now, the Libertarian Party of Canada can say yes, adamantly. We're the ones that have been pushing the ball forward. We're the ones that have been doing the only practical thing to get us more liberty, and that is creating more libertarians. And we've been doing it for 45 years, and there's more libertarians now than ever. And everyone wants to be a libertarian or pretend they're a libertarian and get the libertarian nod. We're being used again by these populists and conservatives and collectivists, but that's fine. There's still more of us today. We'll learn our lesson eventually. So we're the only people that are doing that. It's not, the people, like even the PPC. The PPC is not is not popular among libertarians because of what Maxime Bernier has done for 2.5 years or 2.5 terms in office, voting for statism and voting status quo conservatism, voting to bomb Libya, to bail out big business, to engage in Keynesian economics, to tax and spend. None of the stuff that Bernie, like he's no Ron Paul, right? He hasn't never stood up in Parliament and banged the table and woken people up to liberty. That's been us. That's been the Libertarian Party of Canada. And so if there's more libertarians around today who are getting excited about Maxime Bernier and his somewhat libertarian economic platform, that's because of what the Libertarian Party has done and the libertarians have done by sticking to principles, by not chasing votes, by not chasing pragmatism. We're the only people that are moving the needle at all on liberty. And so you're always welcome back to join us.